a little bit. I have another job, as a lot of you do, and I've got to do it today. So thank you. We'll start off with the roll call. Hugh, are you doing the roll call?
We'll go around the room for people here and then ask Jordan to do it for everybody online. So,
All right, start it
Rosie,
off.
can we start with you?
Rosie Hernandez, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Jordan Chandler, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Jory Johnner, WFRC Long Range Planning Group.
Calvin Clark, MAG.
Carla Merrill, MAG.
Jared Bowling, UDOT.
Hugh Van Wagenen, Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Judy Murray, UTA.
Nana May with Stockton, Tulloch County.
Dan Wayne, MAG.
Brandon Weston with UDOT.
My name's Elliot Mott. I'm a volunteer organizer.
Byron Head, WFRC Community and Economic Development.
Bryce Terry, Harriman City.
Ellen Burrell.
Kelly Gilman with AECom.
Ellen Burrell, Cottonwood Heights City Council.
David Mitchell, Davis County.
I'll go ahead and read those that are online. We've got Ellen Burrell, Cottonwood Heights City Council, David Mitchell, Ted Knowlton, Mark Bradley, Terry, Byron Head, John Nichols, Brett McKiff, Mayor Troy Walker, and Megan Roshk.
All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda is a 1B. We need a motion to approve the minutes from February 13th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
I would, but I can't. Anybody at all?
It's a pretty simple one.
Motion to approve.
Excellent. Motion by who?
Thanks. That's Dee Dee at UTA.
All right, thank you. UTA stepping in to the silence. Is all in favor of approving February 13th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I dispensed with the second because everyone was bashful on the motion. All right, next item up is the chair's report, and I'll be brief if I can. As you know, next month coming up, Bike Month. It's an opportunity if your community is looking to participate in Bike Month in May, but not sure where to start. If you need some help, the League of American Bicyclists have partnered with Love to Ride during Bike Month for the Make Every Ride Count initiative. It's an effort that encourages cyclists to log their rides and rate the comfort of their routes using the new Love to Ride app. The collected data will establish a national benchmark for route comfort. Mapped data will be released post-Bike Month. Visit loveride.net to find more information and sign up for the Make Every Ride Count initiative. I guess that's different than Strava, Hugh.
It is slightly different, but you can link your Strava account there if you have one too. So they work together.
So if you're riding using Strava, you could participate quite easily there. That's awesome.
Sure can. Yep.
So Bike Month, if you're hopefully you all have something planned in your communities to honor Bike Month. Rides. I know we have the Golden Spoke ride that the WFRC is putting on. Hopefully, if you're not doing your own event, you can participate in that. That's a great event with all kinds of opportunity for people to see our amazing Jordan River Trail and the Murdoch Canal Trail and the Ogden Rail Trail, all the trails from Ogden to Provo. So if you're looking for something to do and you don't have something in your own community, Hugh can hook you up with when the dates are for that. But yeah, Bike Month coming up. That's really all I've got. Try and make a good Bike Month out of it. Hugh, did you want to give the dates for Golden Spoke? Maybe a little bit of information.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Golden Spoke ride is Saturday, May 11th. And there's a ride starting in Ogden, a ride starting in Provo, a ride starting in Mill Creek, and some shorter rides for families starting at the Jordan River Nature Center that the Tracy Aviary hosts. So lots of options for people on that day. And thanks to all the partners that have been working hard to make that happen this year.
All right, thank you, Hugh.
Hey, Mayor, can I just ask, so we've been doing this Golden Spoke thing for a while, just by show of hands in the room and online, who has participated in a riding on the Golden Spoke day of the ride? Raise your hand if you have. Oh, would you look at how many new people there are that haven't done it? Okay, it's really fun, and it's like, I think it's the only community bike riding thing that is our whole region participating in something together. And I'm just highlighting it because one, it's fun. And two, it's because this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to accomplish the connectivity of our entire region by bicycle. So it's kind of special. And I'll be there on my bike, and I hope everybody else is too.
Thanks, Andrew. Anybody else want to comment on Bike Month? All right, next item is actually public comment. Is there anyone in the room, Hugh, that wants to make public comment?
We do. Mr. Mott, please make your way to the front.
All right, come on up. I don't know if we have timing rules or not. In my meetings in the city, we do 3 minutes, so I'm going to go with that. Somebody time 3 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Just press the button, make sure it's green. Thank you.
Button that says push. Thank you. My name is Elliot Mott. I'm a volunteer organizer of outdoor events. Applicable to this group is probably cycling. I've led rides for many, many, many years all over Utah, mostly northern Utah. I was interested in today's Wall Street Journal to say that Salt Lake City is one of the fastest growing areas in the entire country. And they add because of the recreational opportunities. And the programs that you fund and sponsor is a large part of that. So please keep it up. We need that focus. I first got involved with this committee when it was first constituted with Commissioner Downs. At that time, this room was standing room only. It's changed through the years. I don't know why it has. I think there's still an emphasis on active transportation, but I'm not seeing the large group that I saw at that time.
Elliot, I'll just interrupt you briefly to note that part of the reason for that is because half of the attendees are online. But I still get your point about the need to have excitement about active transportation. But if you combined everybody, we'd have about the same attendance. But go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I first got involved with the goat head thorn problem, and it still exists, ladies and gentlemen. I need you to step up and create programs and policies and procedures to address that issue. It's a huge problem for road cyclists and dog walkers. I was happy to see the Jordan River Commission adopt my bounty program, but I need other people to adopt that as well and do other initiatives to rid our area of goat head thorns. I need UDOT to step up. We have roads that have this much wide shoulder, and they repave it with that much shoulder. They have the right-of-way, they have the tools, they have the expertise. Cyclists need a wider shoulder on the roads. And finally, I'd like you to bring in Bragg if you can. I don't know if your organization allows it, Andrew, but Bragg is a wonderful area in northern Utah. Cache Valley is super popular. They need to be represented here, I think, or have you represented there, because their agendas do not involve active transportation at all, and they should. So thank you for the time. I appreciate the work you all do.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to make public comment in the room?
I'm not seeing anybody else.
All right, is there anyone online that would like to make public comment?
I don't think we see anybody.
All right, thank you. We'll move on then from public comment. Item number 4, this is a community highlight, the Harriman Trails Network. As you know, it's exciting to see so many communities getting involved, but Harriman and the kind of southeast quadrant of our Salt Lake County, they're doing amazing work and creating awesome trail opportunities. So we've got, who we got from Bryce Terry with Harriman City. Bryce, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Yep, just like you said, my name is Bryce Terry. I'm from the Harriman City Engineering Department. And so we just want to talk a little bit about our trail system. It's obviously something that our residents really value and take priority in the area of Harriman, but it's not unique to Harriman, right? All cities and jurisdictions are looking to build trail systems. We know UDOT's taken a big step towards trail systems. And so this will just be a kind of quick synopsis of the trail system that we've been working on in Harriman and hope to kind of connect regionally. So this is kind of a map of just, if you're not familiar with the Harriman boundaries, we're kind of in that southwest quadrant of the Salt Lake County, right up against kind of Camp Williams is the south border, and Redwood Road is kind of the southeast border. Bluffdale, Riverton, South Jordan are all kind of surrounding to the east of Harriman. We're kind of tucked up to the mountain. And because of this, we have a couple of canyons that are real close by for recreation that the county manages. So Yellow Fork is a canyon that is just outside of Harriman boundaries. And the new Butterfield Canyon trailhead that the county's building right now is also a recreation area that's just outside the boundaries. So Harriman has just naturally been placed like many cities up against these areas and of high recreation and areas that people can get out and get active, whether that's mountain biking, just riding their bike to work, or riding horses. Equestrian use is a big use in the original heart of Harriman. And so because of that, our cities really tried to take that as a priority and build Harriman as a recreation center. And so because of that, I just kind of wanted to go through a timeline of history of how the trail networks were built. So these are kind of 4 years before these pictures pop up. It's going to be kind of a timeline of trails being built starting in 2001. So in 2001, Harriman, those boundaries, we weren't that big. That's right before, right when Harriman was incorporated. The boundary you're seeing is kind of the final boundary, or the current boundary as of today. But you can see in 2001, we had just barely started paving trails. But the nice thing with Harriman and many of the other communities around is that from the beginning, there were even developers that were interested in putting in trails with their subdivisions. And so it really started out to kind of say, hey, this is going to be a priority no matter where it is in the city. So we started out, this is 2001, jumped to 2005, and you can see big boom of trails there because of our main development partner that kind of helped found Harriman, took that as a priority, and the city agreed and kind of pushed and helped fund some of these trails from the beginning. Like I said, a good push in the beginning was equestrian use. That if you kind of know the history of Harriman, it was out there kind of in the middle of nowhere and a little bit more rural, right? And so equestrian use was actually the first kind of purpose of these trails in Harriman to allow those to ride their horses throughout the kind of neighborhood and in the area. So that's 2005. Jump into 2009, the trails keep growing. So it's kind of hard to see up there. Purple is an asphalt trail, and then the green is the equestrian trail. So generally like a wrap material or pea gravel material. We call it unpaved here. And then we'll jump to 2013. We're starting to now kind of focus more on the paved trails. Mountain View, kind of right on the eastern border, came in and paved a concrete trail with Mountain View. So that really helped give us kind of a north-south connection that we could now start to connect to. So jump to 2017, we're still kind of putting in pockets of paved trails throughout. 2021, we're starting to build on creeks, and I'll get to this in a little bit on really prioritizing the creek areas within Harriman and building trails along those creeks. And then we jump to 2023 is what this is. So this is a little bit outdated, but we're starting to try and connect some of those areas together. So still a lot of work to do, still a lot of gaps that we're trying to fill. But you can kind of see how if you have something to start out with and build, and then you can kind of infill and get those gaps so that we're not having a trail isolated all by itself. And like I said, a lot of this is as you know, Harriman and many of the cities have a lot of development going on. This is working with development as they come in to say, hey, this is in our master plan, this is in our active transportation plan. Let's put this trail in on the back side of your subdivision at the same time. So in some cases, these are reimbursement agreements with developers that as they're building the trail, grading out the site, it's cheaper for the city to have the developer actually go out and build the trail and us reimburse them for that cost. So that's a lot of how the trails were built in Harriman, is with reimbursement agreements as developments coming in. I understand that Harriman's probably a little younger than a lot of the other cities in the area, but that's how we've done it. So, and I'll talk about our active transportation a little bit more, but this was done in about 2021. We did a survey as part of our active transportation on what was the priority. Is it more bike lanes? Is it more asphalt trails? Is it more sidewalks? Is it more separated paths? And so you can kind of see in our results that by far the preferred method of travel for active transportation by our residents were paved pathways, asphalt trails. And I think a part of this, like I said, this was in 2021, so residents could see kind of the impact in communities that did have the trails in Harriman versus those that didn't. And so from this study, there were more kind of questions that we asked. We really understood that our residents really want asphalt trails. That's their priority. Not to say that bike lanes aren't important. Obviously, we've got to connect these trails with bike lanes and with walking paths, sidewalks, right? But the biggest priority for residents were asphalt paths. So with that in mind, where can we put these trails, right? And we like to call them 2-for-1 deals, areas where trails make sense, that are really good for both a developer, for a city, for residents, and trying to make these trail corridors connect in a long stretch, in a continuous stretch that doesn't just create gaps. So with that in mind, these are kind of where most of our trails have been located. Now there are areas outside of these corridors, but these kind of make a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. So a power corridor, you can kind of see in this picture, this is in Harriman. No structures are generally allowed underneath a transmission power corridor. So like Pacific Core generally will either own the parcel that's there, or they have an easement over a parcel that doesn't allow any structures or any kind of building to go underneath those power lines. And so because of that, it's a really unusable space for development, for business, for a lot of, but it does open up a corridor for asphalt trail. And generally, we've been able to work with Rocky Mountain Power and Pacific Core to either get our own easement on their property or to build these trails with their permission under these power lines. There are obviously benefits for them to have an asphalt trail. It acts as like a maintenance road, and I'll talk about that on others that they can drive on and get to their towers. The one con with power corridors, especially these older transmission lines, there is a little bit of a buzzing noise as you're under the power lines. And so a little bit of a nuisance, but still a great area to use for our trails. We have a lot of these power corridors in Harriman as we're on the west side where the power is running up in north and south. And so that's one of the areas we use. Like I said, the creeks, so we have a couple of regional creeks in the city. Midas Creek, if you've heard of it, or Rose Creek, are both creeks that kind of come from the mountains and eventually make it to the Jordan River. And so these are areas where, again, the county likes to have a maintenance road established, an asphalt maintenance road. And so at that point, it makes a lot of sense to make it a trail. They're not actually using it for a maintenance road very often. And so it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal to establish kind of a buffer from the creek, from homes, from businesses, but to also establish a long continuous corridor that can go east-west in Harriman City, kind of from one side of the city to the other. It also is a nice open space area, kind of a calmer area, obviously off of the major roads. And so, yeah, long stretches with few obstacles, as I say in there. And then again, similar to creeks, canals generally have a maintenance road need adjacent to the canal and create kind of a long continuous stretch. That's a great area for us that we're working on right now with Welby Jacobs Canal to kind of put a trail adjacent to that. And then we've also kind of reserved some future transit corridor space where we haven't allowed development or building. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for that transit to come and what that'll look like and figuring that all out in the long-term future, we've gone in and paved asphalt trails in that area to allow for kind of that use to not just be wasted. And then, of course, any large parks that we can connect to or go around to provide more of that connectivity is a great opportunity. So some of the regional connections that we're trying to make in Harriman, and a lot of these connect into either Riverton or South Jordan, east and north of us. So like I mentioned, Rose Creek right now, we have about 3.5 miles that go from the west end here of Harriman into Riverton until it hits Mountain View. And we're working with Riverton to hopefully, Mountain View's a little bit of an obstacle here to get to the other side, a little bit of a barrier. But we're working with Riverton, hopefully with the new Mountain View project to look at options for a separated grade crossing or some kind of way to get pedestrians to the other side, because Riverton has continued building on the east side of Mountain View and will continue to build to the east side. Midas Creek, like I mentioned before, another kind of regional creek that goes through Harriman, Riverton, South Jordan, that all cities are kind of building along this Midas Creek. And similar, we have a good continuous stretch until we hit kind of a major roadway, which is Bangerter. And so it continues on the other side of Bangerter, and you can go up to the signal. They're actually working in the area right now of 134th and Bangerter. And there was a bridge at that intersection, and they're kind of realigning that and building it with the Bangerter project right now. So, and then Butterfield Creek is another one. This one's a little bit more localized to Harriman. It ends up tying into Midas Creek, but this is just another opportunity where there's open space that can't be built on, and we require a buffer off of the creek that we can put in those asphalt trails. And then, as I mentioned, Welby Jacobs Canal, you may have heard Riverton just received a good amount of money to start building their trail along Welby Jacobs Canal. And we're hoping, so on this picture, it's kind of that east side of our boundary line. That's Bluffdale on the other side and Riverton on the north side. So we're hoping to work with Riverton to connect this all the way down to Porter Rockwell, which is just off of the screen here. So really, how do you get momentum? How do we get these projects funded or have them become a priority? And so I think there's a lot of stakeholders in these processes, even if it's a local trail that's not connecting regionally. I think there's a lot of steps. Just within the city, you have elected officials, you have engineering department, planning department, parks department, public works department, that all kind of want their say on maintenance or how it should look, what width, and where should it go, how far should it be off of residents, how is it going to interact with roads, how is it going to interact with zoning. And so within city, I think that is something that for us, we had to figure out and all get a priority. And I think we got lucky to have an administrator that was formerly in the Parks Department that really made this a priority for all of our departments, and we're able to get buy-in from City Council and our Planning Commission. And so ever since then, we've kind of set up a reputation and expectations that we will build trails with developments in Harriman and even outside of developments, just on separate city projects. As we mentioned, residents have kind of seen these asphalt trails going in and keep asking for them in their part of the city, right? So that one's kind of been a little bit easier. And like we said in the survey, residents have really bought into this idea of connecting with asphalt trails and not having to go out to a road or going to sidewalk every time. And then, as I mentioned before, we were lucky enough to work with developers and to establish a plan ahead of development coming in that we were able to, as those homes were going in, build those trails. I know in certain areas, right, not everyone loves people walking in their backyard on a trail looking into their house, right? But if the trail goes in with the development and not after, that complaint generally goes away because they're buying the house with the expectation that there'll be a trail in their backyard. And then finally, as we are meeting here regionally, those regional connections are key to funding, right? So if we're working on a large project, the city might not be able to fund it. We might have to go out for grants or other funding opportunities. And to make sure that our plans are matching up with the region plans, obviously Wasatch Front works on a regional transportation plan that includes active transportation, but additionally, the county has a master plan, the other cities around us have a master plan, and so connecting those are kind of a big priority to get any kind of funding outside of the city. So with that said, how do we tie that all together? I think most of the agencies in the area have worked on an active transportation plan. This is what we refer to with development, with capital projects, with grant funds, applications. I mean, this is what we're looking at and kind of referring on where the priority of projects are, the list of projects, cost estimates of what we think the project will cost. So we are a little bit more shovel ready on some of these projects than we would be without our active transportation plan, which is not unique to Harriman. And so just kind of a couple of trail projects that we're working on this summer to continue that work. So you may have heard of a Olympia development that's recently been annexed into Harriman City. So they, again, working with a development before it's built to make sure that trails are planned in and throughout the community. What will be really helpful for us is that the Olympia area actually goes all the way to Butterfield Canyon, which is that new trailhead that Salt Lake County is building, as I was talking about. So a lot of our existing trails will actually connect into Olympia, this new development area, and be able to connect to that new trailhead, which is a high priority for us. And then as we talked about, Midas Creek is another big project for us to continue going as far west as we can within our city boundaries, and then continue to work with South Jordan Rio Tinto group to continue that west as we keep building it out. And then one that I haven't talked about is canyons or major drainages that aren't necessarily regional creeks. Juniper Canyon is one for us in Harriman that Mountain View has a bridge over it. So it's really easy to put a trail underneath and have that grade separated and continue and not have a major barrier in between one side of Mountain View to the other as far as these asphalt trails go. And so, yeah, I think that's all I've got on Harriman. I can answer any questions or anything from there.
That's a great presentation. You guys are doing a lot. That's exciting. It's going to really connect our whole valley. So great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is really cool what you guys are doing in Harriman. I'm curious about the asphalt trails, and it seems like, as you said, it's a goal of the residents. Does the town have any goals to make those asphalt trails ADA compliant? So more of like a shared use path?
Yeah, that's the intent on our newer projects. Some of our older projects obviously didn't have that in mind, but our newer projects, that is the intent. Obviously with asphalt trails, and this may be a little bit more technical than anyone wants to hear, but whenever we come to a street crossing or anything, right, we're transitioning to concrete just because it's much easier to meet the ADA requirements at that point. But the long runs of meeting slopes and trying to kind of have a universal use of these trails, that is the intent. One thing I didn't talk about is that Harriman is also building a big primitive trail system that's not paved, that's more for mountain biking, hiking, equestrian use kind of in the mountains as well, that we're hoping to connect some of these asphalt trails to the same trailheads that those primitive trails are being built to. And so yes, it's always a concern or always a thought. we are trying to see, okay, obviously in those more primitive trails, it's harder to meet those ADA kind of goals. But on our asphalt trails, we are trying to do that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation.
Mayor, I
Excellent.
think we have at least one more question here from
Go ahead.
Councilman Bell.
Thank you. I'm very interested, obviously, when you allude to the cities that don't have a lot of green space to develop, that would be Cottonwood Heights. And so the whole retrofit is our constant challenge. And the residents who have bought their home based on no trails nearby have been extremely resistant to, obviously, creekside trails. It's really an ongoing challenge. But back to your primitive trails. So I know as a cyclist, I really enjoy getting on, I guess you would call it crushed stone. But getting off of everything being black asphalt or you could say even concrete. And how does the cost compare doing either crushed stone, or when you refer to primitive, what material are you referring to? And how does the cost compare with asphalt?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I refer to primitive, I'm mostly referring to kind of more road-based or dirt trails that are in our mountains, more for hiking and mountain biking. The crushed stone trails, we originally were putting a lot of those in, like I said, for equestrian use. And even in some of our current projects, like I said, we've kind of transitioned from crushed stone to more of a recycled asphalt. It's a little bit cheaper, more available, easier to install. And so that cost is a little bit lower than installing an asphalt trail, if that wrap's available, that recycled asphalt. One thing that we do is a lot in the city. We have projects that we are ripping up roads, milling them up, and then we can stockpile some of that recycled asphalt at our public works yard and then go and use them on path projects in other areas of the city. And we are actually doing that right now. And so I would recommend looking into recycled asphalt as a path. If you can't do a paved path of asphalt or concrete, that might be another option.
Wow, I'm so fascinated by this. One of the things I'm really working on is we're finding financially, we have all these roadways, collectors arterials, even local streets that are super wide. And I'm trying to get the kind of best practices going on around the valley to, make some of our roads smaller so they're not so expensive to maintain. And in that, create more, water-wise landscaped areas. And so your idea, we just are finishing a new public works complex, but that's fascinating that should we do some kind of road diets, we could actually store some of the asphalt that we've ripped up to then lay down as path potentially in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And it wouldn't even necessarily require, it is a good opportunity when you're doing road diets, but even in cases where they're just doing maintenance of kind of redoing the top of the road, milling and overlaying is what we call it. They can take those millings, and if you have room at your public works yard, you can store those there and then hopefully either hire a contractor or maybe do it yourself to take those and put those in path areas where you would like to see some more of those paths that maybe we can't afford to pave.
Wow,
Hey,
that's fascinating. I know we're about to spend $1 million for Prospector Drive. One collector, $1 million to reconstruct that road. So I won't take more time, but thank you. This is really fascinating what you're doing in Harriman. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Bryce, nice, great work, great presentation. I have a question for you about latent demand, but I just also want to note that Mayor Palmer from Harriman, he says so much good stuff is happening in Harriman and that the Harriman staff is crushing it. So nice work. My question is about latent demand for you, just briefly. And there's so many local government representatives here, cities and counties, and I wonder, what's your sense of latent demand, meaning people that would bike or would walk if the trail system was made more available to them? Can you just give a sense of what's your perspective on that? And if anybody else wants to comment, from a city or county perspective about that as well. We'd love to hear it briefly.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I kind of glossed over some of the survey results of our active transportation plan, but this is kind of where we understood a lot about our community. One of the questions we asked is if you had a paved trail close to your house within a mile or so at longest, what would be the likelihood that you use that, and how frequently would you use that? And it was surprising. I can't remember the numbers. It was on one of the previous slides that said they would use these paths daily if they were built near their home. Now, obviously, you got to take that with a grain of salt. We always say active transportation, any kind of exercising, right? We say, hey, if this was available to it, we'd use it this much. Now, but with that said, the fact that many people were saying that they would be using these trails daily for either recreation, commuting, just taking their child in a stroller on a walk, or taking their dog for a walk, that's a ton of the use we see in Harriman. It was enormous amounts that I never thought would be using these trails daily if they were available to them. So I can speak to what we've seen as far as survey results, and then when we go and install those, when people know that they're coming, they do tend to get used quite a bit as soon as we install them. I mean, there's a little bit of a kind of a bell curve that eventually it kind of levels off to a normal use, but I think that it is true. Our community is always asking for them, and as soon as they get put in, they're being used, and the uses are different. Like I was saying, not a ton of commuter use in Harriman, but there's starting to be more regional connections where that is possible, and hopefully transit coming into Harriman where that becomes even more of a commuter use, but it's a lot of recreation, a lot of just exercise and getting out and talking to neighbors and whatnot. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bryce. Really appreciate it. Oh, Ted has his hand up.
Well,
Sorry.
Quick
Yeah,
interjection on the latent demand question. We recently, across the whole state, surveyed in depth about 10,000 residents on transportation, including their transportation attitudes. And a third of all respondents said they would bicycle more if the network was safer. So a third of the entire population, that's not a third of people that already, I mean, of a really good, robust random sample, just to give you a sense of it. Thanks.
Ted, that was a comment wearing your WFRC hat, and now I'll put you on the spot wearing your North Salt Lake City Council and former Planning Commission chair hat. What about in your community? How would you translate that, like, desire, latent demand, in if the trails build the trails and they will come? What do you think?
The challenge that we have, and I think a lot of communities have, is that my community, North Salt Lake, is like a puzzle piece in having a route that goes from a really great origin to a really great destination. And so we believe that in our case, when the connections to downtown Salt Lake City are safe, that we'll start to see people in North Salt Lake commute by bike at a much higher level. They're asking for it, but we're just a piece of that puzzle, and that's part of the value of the regional coordination. We're seeing a lot of activity on our recreational trails, and that's what people are asking for when it comes to commuter bicycling facilities.
Thanks, Ted. Thanks a lot, Bryce. Appreciate you being here. Oh, Commissioner Fackrell.
Of course, I'm going to say something. I mean, Andrew was expecting me to say something. Everybody talks about the cities and the trails in the cities, but every weekend and during the week, we have people come to our county and they use the roads, but our residents won't even get out on the roads because they know what the roads are like. So the more trails we could have, it would be great, and especially paved trails, especially along the highways. So for Stephanie, we need help.
Thanks. As we move into our next agenda item, Mayor Walker had to step away, as he mentioned, to his other job. And we've had several members join us since the roll call, including Councilmember Heyer in Ogden, Councilmember Harrison in Salt Lake County, Mayor Gale from Morgan City, Commissioner Fackrell, whom we just heard from Morgan County, Mayor Petro, who is our vice chair, will take over chairing the meeting for Mayor Walker, who's with us. Mayor Jepson with Perry has also joined us, and Chris Wiltsey with Bike Utah has joined since the roll call. So thank you all for being here. Mayor Petro, can I turn it over to you?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm trying to get my video to work too, and it's just not taking it. But in the meantime, I just got to say, what a great presentation. I was fascinated with Harriman and their progress, and I'm a little jealous, but I do know that we've just gone through that process, and I'm excited to get ours going too. So again, thanks to the Wasatch Regional Front for helping us with our plan. Going forward though, next item on our topic is the UDOT update. And over the recent years, UDOT has taken a more proactive approach to building active transportation facilities, both through the standalone projects and enlarge the roadway projects. So today, we have Stephanie Tolman from the Trails Division and Brandon Weston from the Environmental Division to get us up to speed on UDOT's active transportation work. So with that, I'll turn it over to them.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So yeah, Stephanie Tomlin with the Utah Department of Transportation, the Trails Division Director over there. So I'm going to jump in and give an update on the Utah Trail Network. This is a new program at the department. We have ongoing funding now to build a statewide trail network, affectionately known as Utah Trail Network or UTN. So I'm going to give an update because we're at a phase now where we have initial projects that we've recommended for programming. Programming just means kind of allocating or encumbering money to that project. So I'm going to give an update on those projects, but then also give an update on our larger vision, where we're going within the program. So before I advance the slide, just a quick primer, I guess, the Utah Trail Network funding, this is $45 million of ongoing funding that was allocated to the Utah Department of Transportation. This happened at the 2023 legislative session. And then in the first year, so the FY24, there was an additional $45 million of one-time funding. So in that first year, we had $90 million of funding. The goal of this program is to connect communities using a paved trail network that is kind of stipulated in code. It needs to be paved, but it's to connect communities to their destination, to their jobs, to their schools. Again, provide an option for kind of the way that the last presentation ended, talking about latent demand and kind of that commuting need. The hope with this network is this becomes the spine or backbone regional network for that kind of commuting need that then the local community networks can connect into. I loved that discussion around, right? We still need bike lanes to connect in the same way we still need, you know, the arterial roads to connect into our large freeways. Think of this kind of as the freeway system for active transportation. I acknowledge that's a very car-centric analogy, but it's a good one.
Stephanie,
Yes.
I can't resist interjecting.
Okay.
Stephanie said $45 million a year from the state, ongoing, meaning every year there will be $45 million plus another $45 million in one time. And the only reason I'm making a point about this is those of us that have been working on this for a while, it was a goal for really over a decade to get state money, significant state money on an ongoing basis to invest in our trails. And I just want to highlight that so that we don't take for granted that huge accomplishment that would not have happened without the people in this room, the people online, predecessors, the support and engagement from the state and from local communities and the private sector and the MPOs, all saying this is critical for our future. And it's just a really, really big deal. I don't want us to take it for granted, even though we sort of can because the money is permanently established. But it's so exciting, and I don't know, I'll stop like sort of celebrating it at every occasion, but particularly now hearing, this is really the first full update on what's happening, what that money can produce for active transportation in our state. And it's just an exciting thing. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. It is. It's really, really exciting. State money versus federal, just to take that one step further, fewer strings attached in that way, but a great opportunity to kind of get things rolling, get things moving. And then there's also kind of a windfall of federal money available now in our current administration. So kind of using it as an option. There's potentially matching to even make that money go further. So yes, super exciting. Okay, so Utah Trail Network. So I'm going to give, as I mentioned, updates on two major components. So I'll refer to this as the UTN, right? And we know what we're talking about, Utah Trail Network. Add another acronym into our acronym soup. Our initial project list development, how did we come to a list of projects that I mentioned that we're getting ready to ask the Transportation Commission to approve in May? And then I want to kind of pivot into where are we moving long term, because it's really important to note that the initial programming, as you see here on this slide in the purple, this was really just the first phase. And in my opinion, at what you see on the right-hand side there in that orange bubble, that's the more important phase of like kind of setting up and establish where are we going, we, collective, we, all of us, where are we going as we kind of continue to develop the Utah Trail Network. So, but as I mentioned, I will start here. So initial programming, once this funding became available, there was a desire to move quickly, right? This is new funding. The legislature is really excited to see how, where we allocate this funding, how we kind of move with it quickly. So and this was mentioned earlier, there certainly are a lot of local plans already available. Huge kudos to all the communities that spend a lot of time and resources on those. But this, again, this is kind of take one step higher, right? This is the 30,000-foot view and the trails thereof that are serving at that level. So we didn't have that plan in place yet. It's kind of, we've been having to build the airplane as we've been flying it, so to speak. So we had to start in this first purple bubble here where it was saying, okay, get moving quickly. And so what did we do with that? Well, we took a look at where there were immediate needs. There's obviously a backlog of active transportation projects across the entire state that if we had funding, we could fund and move forward with quickly. So it's an opportunity to address those needs quickly, to get some of those quick wins under our belt. And kind of, I put it out there as like seeding that network, right? Like what are some of those projects that once we get them in place, right, we could imagine that they build out into our larger network. So that's kind of the first, that's where we've been in this last, since as this slide shows, like July 2023, when the funding became available, we really hit the ground running to kind of get moving on that first. I'm going to talk through how we got that, but this is, I think, a powerful slide to demonstrate, even in a really expedited process, we started with 160 projects. And where did those come from? They came from specific workshops that the department did across the state, and then MPO support helped us with workshops kind of locally in the communities. You might remember some of those that happened in this region, thanks to WFRC giving kind of a little session on the Utah Trail Network. But we started with 160 projects. Unfortunately, we couldn't fund all of those, even with the 45 plus 45, right? So we then had to whittle that down to around 43 projects, and I'll talk through the criteria that we used to do so. But the 43 are what we ended up putting through our prioritization model, and then 21 projects. Those are the ones that fit within our program budget for that 90 million or that first time funding. So how did we develop that list? As I mentioned, we kind of coined the term like trails went out on tour. We went across the entire state and visited with communities to ask, what are your important projects in your region that you feel serve this regional need? That's a really important distinction here. We're not going to build every project in every community, but we are going to build the ones that are serving that regional connection, that spine, that backbone. We then vetted all of that information through our guiding principles that we developed really early on. And then we coordinated with the UDOT regions to address additional information associated with those projects. And then we had to tier them because, again, we had those 43 projects and we knew that there was no possible way that we would fund all of those, again, just in the initial programming. As Andrew said, this is ongoing funding, so we're not in fear that we aren't going to be able to get to them eventually. It's just we had to move forward with some that were the most ready. So we, as the last bullet here says, we sorted the projects based on local priority and project readiness. So that got us to this list. You can see, or this, this map. You can see the darkest blue this is just an illustrative. You're not supposed to be able to see all of them, but just to point out, you can see right at the beginnings almost of a network being formed here. The darkest blue are what we considered the tier 1 projects. And then light blue is tier 2 and the orange is considered tier 3. So then that got us to the point where we put all of those tier 1 projects through the TIF active prioritization model. I assume some of you in the room have heard of the TIF active funding. Maybe I can get a raise of hands, okay, awesome. So the TIF active funding, this, by the way, this funding isn't going anywhere. So now, we also have this to hopefully continue to build out our local network. But we use a prioritization model. All it does is it gives, kind of data-driven measures to evaluate different projects. So we ran our Utah Trail Network projects through that same model because it obviously works. It serves for active transportation projects. So this is the outcome. It's, again, you're not supposed to necessarily see all of them other than to say, we developed and this resulted in a ranked list of all of those 43 projects. So then again, we had to go in and say, okay, we have those 43, this is how much money we have available. So we had to really buckle down and say which ones are shovel ready. These projects needed to show that they've done some level of design work or feasibility study that, again, imagine then the department kind of picking up that project in short order and being able to kind of move it through. So yes, it had to have that level of kind of design work done. So this is the map of those 21 projects that we worked on developing a cost estimation for them if they didn't already, or we updated the existing one that was available. So then that resulted in this list here, where we took, you can see on the, I guess on this side here on the left, that's the project rank. Again, back to that prioritized list, and then kind of moving across, you can see in the red column there, that's the initial programming amount that the Trails Division is recommending for that project. Again, and it takes into account, we're really careful to make sure to take into account if the project had additional funding already allocated to it. This is the amount that was needed from the state in order to bring it to fruition. So there's, a good smattering of the WFRC area projects. You can see the column, the MPO area there. So it's super exciting to get to a point where we have projects that we can say, hey, we're ready, ready to move forward on these. So we presented these at the March Transportation Commission.
Steph,
Yeah.
thank you. Noted
Yeah.
the WFRC area and the MAG area. This
Yes,
committee
yep.
is actually, we bring WFRC and MAG together.
Perfect.
So thank you. I just wanted to,
Yeah.
for our friends in Utah County, I wanted to note that.
I stayed silent on purpose, actually.
But we also include all of our friends, right? Because then we have CMPO, Dixie MPO, as well as our rural areas as well. So this list represents 63 miles of trail across 14 unique counties in the state of Utah. And, and there's projects in every one of the 4 UDOT regions. So this is kind of in wrapping up what we did to get to that initial programming list. You can kind of see the steps that we went through. So the last step that we have there on the very right, project list programming, we did that initial recommendation in March, and we'll go back in May. The commission meeting is in early May. to get approval of this funding. Once that approval occurs, there has to be a public comment period, but then the money is kind of encumbered to that project at that point. So I guess a couple of logistics about that. Some of you actually have probably been getting reached out to by some of us in the Trails Division, because we're getting to that point where we need to kind of set the road or the roadmap for how this is going to work. This is the first time the department has ever done this in terms of kind of taking a project where it is and then moving it through. So things like what's the design of the project? What is does right of way? Are there any right of way implications? What is things like the maintenance agreement? All of that we'll be kind of working through with the local communities once we get to that point. So that's happening like this week and next. Okay, before I kind of jump into the long-term vision, and this is just kind of this will be a quicker section. Are there any questions about this initial programming list? And again, not to be confused with kind of long-term where we're going, but any questions about this list? Okay, awesome.
Steph, really quickly.
Yeah.
Just give us a sense for when the money is available. So it's being programmed and is available to be used when?
So we have to go through a public comment process that has to last a month. So imagine May 8th to June 8th. So after that point, it's turned on. But the funding is already available, so we're not like waiting for the next fiscal year, which is the end of June. So June.
And what is it, the initial programming is of the first 90 million?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, so we did the 90 million of the first year, and then we also added on an additional year of funding. We're holding on to a healthy amount of contingency because, again, there's some unknowns for the department on this. So while it equals, you can see on here 90, the available funding, there was some kind of earmarks that came out of this off the top, but around 120-ish is what was available. So yeah.
And then as a reminder to everybody, the power of ongoing money is that this is the first round of programming.
Yep.
And then this will become, as we go forward, an annual process of programming future years of money. And I know you said this already, but these are funds for the UTN that the state, that UDOT has, that they will spend.
Mm-hmm.
And it can pair or match with other funds that are made available either as grants from the state or from the MPOs or from the feds to local governments, and the money that the cities and the counties generate from their sources. So this is part of the work.
Yep.
I think that we are charged with, we collectively, is coordinating the funding sources that are available. What does the state have? What do the MPOs have? What are the cities? What are the counties? The federal money, tying in with the transit network, coordinating all of these things together, which is why it's so important. And I'm so happy that we have these great relationships that exist, as embodied in this committee, and then just in all the work that the staff does on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. I think a perfect example of that is the project. So the fourth ranked project, it's a crossing of SR 108 in Clinton. This project received through WFRC, the CMAQ funding, received funding through that. And then the Utah Trail Network has identified it as this is a critical connection. There's a trail on both sides, there's schools, right? So we want to make sure to build that overcrossing or undercrossing, but that's a perfect example. We were in touch with you and understanding which projects had funding, and then therefore if Utah Trail Network came in, what would be the amount that was needed. So yeah, we'll continue on that to do that. I wanted to point out on this slide really quick, utahtrailnetwork.udot.utah.gov. That's where, I think we've already mentioned this before, but this is where kind of our landing page, our clearinghouse for all things UTN. The initial programming tab is where you can find all of this information. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up then, started with this same slide showing kind of this Venn diagram of initial programming versus long-term vision. So over here in the orange, this is the kind of, I think this is the most exciting part of getting to do this work, is saying where does this Utah Trail Network need to be and why? And how do we go where, if we were to map it, where would it be mapped? What are some of the opportunities? What are the constraints with locations? So imagine this orange circle here. This is creating the map for the Utah Trail Network. And you might go, oh, well, I saw it on your last, right on your last slide there. Right? Like to a degree, yes, but this was only based off of 8 workshops across the state. This was, we of course vetted and made sure that the unified plan was in alignment with that. But we're trying to say, okay, where these are great projects as well, but how does it all kind of get stitched together? And where do we, how do we make sure that we're emphasizing that connection of communities, creating options for people to use biking, walking, and scooting to get around their communities? So that is really what this orange circle will be. It'll be about a 12-month process, and we're getting going on it in the next couple of weeks here. Where we lay out here's all existing trails, here's existing plans, which ones are the UTN, right? Which ones should be elevated to the Utah Trail Network and why, and then it will result in a map. I want to quickly point out, I did mention existing trails, right? This is where we're going to start answering that question of if there's an existing trail, do we adopt it into the Utah Trail Network, or yes or no, and why? This is also where we'll start asking the questions about maintenance and what that looks like long term. This is also where we'll establish one of the most exciting components of this, in my opinion, is some of the economics. How can communities kind of lean into this network, and how can they kind of really embrace it and use it as a catalyst for whatever kind of economic opportunity that makes sense in that region? Is it drawing people or giving good wayfinding so people know where they can spin off and access a local restaurant? What are those kind of opportunities to connect so people know when they are on this network where they can find the amenities in the community? So that's, there will be opportunities for this. Hugh and I have already discussed that we'd love to get this group, this council involved in that phase. And we'll, of course, when the time comes, we'll reach out on that. But again, this is kind of what I'm most excited about, because this is really that bold and visionary plan for where the Utah Trail Network will be long term. And then, as Andrew said, year after year at that point, we'll be programming projects off of that map. Okay, so I think I already kind of touched on, there will be community involvement, we'll phase projects, and really close coordination with the UDOT regions. So with that kind of concludes prepared remarks. So I'd love questions. Yeah.
Some of these projects, and I don't know if they have met these criteria, but there's 3 different things that I saw in, maybe not in this, but in some trails. Number 1, you were saying connection between communities, regionalized connections between communities. Are any of these going to be used? I mean, is the primary goal to make it connection, or is it primary goal to make it safety, or is it primary goal to make it as active transportation recreation?
I think the beauty of this network is that it can, in fact, be all 3. And here's why. The statute that allocated this funding required that these facilities be paved and separated whenever possible. So this funding cannot be used for bike lanes, like striped bike lanes along a major roadway. So I think knowing that the separated and paved facilities tend to be, and of course I'm generalizing, but they tend to be the safer ones because you're kind of separated from vehicle traffic altogether. And then to the question about connecting communities, I see this as both imagine a project that we have on here, and it's not in this region, but Price to Helper. If you guys have ever driven down Price Canyon, you end up in Helper and then continue to Price. One of the projects we're recommending is to create a paved trail from Helper to Price. That's kind of within that region. Those are 2 really prominent communities, but they don't currently have a connection between them. But that facility, once constructed, will also serve within the community of Helper it'll be a major kind of backbone network for that community. So it's both connecting people within Helper, but then it's also having the added benefit of getting someone they could then ride to access an amenity and price, as an example. So has to be paved, has to be separated, and it has to have that regional kind of component, but it can both be, I would argue regional can be both kind of local and also, longer distances as well. So yeah, good questions. But yeah, we get to have our cake and eat it too, which is nice. Any other questions?
I believe there's a question online.
Okay.
Hand
So-
raised.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you. Oh,
go ahead. Then I will
okay, thank
next.
you. Oh, thank you. So obviously I'm really enthused about the UTN. But a kind of question I still have, this isn't the first I've been exposed to a presentation on the UTN, is that you mentioned the 3 elements to connect communities was destinations, jobs, and schools. But I would just point out that, the percentage of people that would ride across town to get to their job, and those people do exist, and as Ted Knowlton brought out, maybe we could get more of the population who are willing to ride long distances to get to a job. But to get to schools, most schools are nearby. And so I understand that you have this regional, but to talk about connecting small rural towns, you're really talking about tourism. People that would have the time and money to stay in a hotel and take a long bike ride, or perhaps on a weekend maybe. But there's a lot of elements that require the thoughtfulness of where do people lock up their bicycles? Where can they be stored once they get to their destination? These kind of infrastructure, the importance of these, not only the initial capital expenditures, but the maintenance, which as a city council person, I need to learn more about the O&M. Like, if these regional paths come through or near our city, who's responsible to make sure that the debris and snow removal, where they cross arterials and collectors, I mean, these super important things that make this sustainable, those are elements that I know I'm getting questions on, from my council colleagues. How does this, for a municipality become something sustainable financially when our roadways, we already have the asphalt that we have to maintain on our roadways. How do we now add the expenditures of, taking care of these off-road trails?
Is the question the maintenance, like who's doing maintenance?
Well, the O&M to come, I mean, capital, it's great to have these monies from the state to lay down asphalt for off-road trails, but how does it become sustainable over time?
Yeah, so these initial projects that we were recommending, because we're kind of coming into them, or we're joining them kind of where they're at in terms of design and location and all of that. So I think it's, again, we will be looking to partner with the local community on maintenance. However, that long-term vision that I mentioned, right, that's the phase where we will be delving really deeply into maintenance and what that could look like. The statute for this funding calls out that the department can use this funding for planning, construction, operation, and maintenance of these facilities. But this is also, I readily admit, this is a part that UDOT hasn't done in the past. We have built trails along like Mountain View Corridor, Legacy, but then the facility has been handed over to the local community for maintenance. So that's not something that we have done in the past. So figuring out how maintenance could be done, where, why, all of that is what we're hoping to really shed some light on through that planning work. So no decisions yet have been made on maintenance, other to say, I hear that concern for sure. Maintenance is hard, it's expensive, it's not the like sexy ribbon cutting that people want to fund in the long term, but this funding, I would say this funding can be used for maintenance. So we're definitely going to look into that to see what that could look like. Because I mean, once we put these assets out, they're only as good as the long-term maintenance, that we can do on them. So
Well, it-
know that we're not leaving anyone high and dry on that.
Well, and if I may just add one more quick thing, the one thing I'm also not hearing is, as a cyclist where I ride distances, there has been it's very evident that there is not a sensitivity to those of us that cycle on any distance for where can you securely leave your bicycle? How do you transfer from your trail onto a light rail tracks line or onto a bus? How do you plan to integrate with UTA or, transit within metro areas so that realistically people who need to mix transit with their cycling can do that? Again, structures
Yeah.
that purely store bicycles.
Absolutely. We'll be looking to partner with, UTA and other transit agencies once we get into that visioning. We can use this funding potentially on betterments, but I would, 45 million is going to go pretty quick. So we're going to probably look at where are there opportunities for the local community, maybe to fund that trailhead amenity, apply. There's numerous grants, right, available from the state level for that, so that we can really make sure we're using our funding to build the linear miles of these facilities. But I know I also ride kind of long distance stuff and know that it's super important aspect of a good trail is knowing where you have water, where you have restrooms, lighting, like all of those questions, right, are super, super important. So,
Or
yes.
even Mr. Mott's comment about goat heads. I took my young children on a long trail ride on the Jordan River Trail. We got several miles away from the house and all our several tires were filled with goat heads, and I had young children. It became a total nightmare trying to get a vehicle to where the goat head,
Yeah.
these are really important elements. And I appreciate Mr. Mott's comment earlier.
If I can add something really quickly, just on the transition to transit. UTA works a lot on this and the partners do, but we did receive a RAISE grant as a region, right, trying to make those first and last mile connections. So those will continue to happen. And I think the conversation here is really pointing to there's a big ecosystem and everybody has a role to play. Not everybody's just looking to Stephanie and say, okay, execute, and not paying attention to anything else, right? We all have a role to play in this, from the regional aspect to the local aspect. And I know we're getting a little bit long in the tooth with time. So Mayor Petro, I think you had a comment or question, and then looks like Chris with Bike Use also does.
Yeah, I do. I want to make a quick comment, and that is in the fact that I think a prime example of how you have the surrounding communities support a particular project. I'm going to point to the 3-Gate Trail project. I mean, that primarily is going to run along the I-15 corridor on the inside of the Hill Air Force Base gate where the old track system was. And realistically, that's going to help with, again, that work-life commute, but it's for the Roy, Clearfield, Sunset, Ogden base. But as a city to the south, I'm excited about it and I'm willing to support it and want to do all I can there, because I can see that, again, this could tie into the economic benefits that if once we get that part of it established, we can then perhaps work a deal out with the Davis and Weaver Canal Company and be able to connect that existing trail more towards the south and come into kind of like the heart of Layton, where there is an economic benefit and people could peel off and go to the restaurants. And I will address the school issue as well. We have 2 schools there. One would be the Northridge High School. And by utilizing that canal corridor, those kids will be able to jump on that canal work on that trail and be able to not only commute to high school, but it goes right into the Davis Weber State campus as well. So this is just one small example of how we can the benefit of this program long-term and the overall experience of what the state's trying to achieve. So I just want to say thanks for funding that project as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I love it. You're absolutely right and totally catching the vision of what this can be. So great example. And then Chris Wiltsey.
Just for Ellen, Bike Utah during Bike Month, so May, we're going to be doing a training on how community members can work with businesses to put in bike racks. And so the model that we'll be training people on, like, and it'll be in person in Salt Lake City, and we'll actually like install a bike rack in front of everybody. But it's a model that has successfully installed 70 bike racks in Provo at different businesses, just like with no like city involvement or anything. So I'm gonna put our website URL in the chat, and then you can scroll to the bottom and sign up for our newsletter if you're interested, and then that will have the information eventually about when and where that's going to happen.
That's great, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, I
thank
think
you,
with
Chris.
the-
I appreciate that.
I think I'm passing it over to Brandon.
Morning, everyone. I'm Brandon Weston. I'm the Environmental Services Director for UDOT, and I am aware that I am the environmental guy that printed out his slides so he could stand up here and give a presentation. But this is my first time to the Active Transportation Committee, so thank you for the opportunity. It's very exciting to be here. And I guess I have to do this. Where does this thing want to be pointed? Is it at you? There we go. Thank you. So I'm here to talk about how we're considering active transportation in the environmental process. And we think active transportation is a critical element of UDOT's contribution to Utah's transportation vision. We have been addressing active transportation in various ways as we learn and progress in incorporating active transportation into our larger infrastructure decisions. We feel it helps create a system that works well for all users. This is an excerpt out of the transportation vision, and you can see rightly so that Utah is ranked high in terms of well-being. I think that's always been the case, and it's been stable over the years, but it's been growing at an incredible rate, as we all have felt. And what I thought was really interesting from this sheet was in the lower right-hand corner, the elements of what makes up quality of life for people. And if you look at those, it's a reduction in traffic, it's improved affordability of housing, air quality, roads and sidewalks, and improved public transportation. So I think active transportation could play a big role in keeping those things going. As our growth continues, maintaining and enhancing those things in our communities that contribute to the quality of life will become more and more important. So when I think of active transportation, I think of connections, I think of access, and I think of choice. And I think personally it would be great if it was a choice every day for all users on how they were going to get to where they want to be. And this is a product of that vision. It's the quality of life framework. I'm sure many of you have seen it. In looking at this, I felt like active transportation met 3 of these goals very well. And that was until I listened to Stephanie's presentation today, because obviously good health, active transportation is right there, better mobility, of course, connected communities, got all those things. I never made the tie to the economics until Stephanie's presentation today. So thank you. That was great. And funny enough, I sit really close to Stephanie. I hardly ever see her, and now I know why, because you've been busy. That's insane. So what's UDOT doing to address active transportation and environmental? So we do the obvious things, right? We review local and regional land use plans, transportation plans. We review active transportation plans if they're available. We perform gap analysis based on those plans to see where those gaps are in the multimodal connectivity. We do walk audits with communities and city and community leaders. And just generally assess the regional transit and trail systems in the project area. Most importantly, I think what has bore the most fruit, as it were, is conducting community workshops and hearing from the people that live there and what their struggles are in their communities and what their barriers are. And so to the right, this is just a generic, well, it's not generic, it's from the I-15 EIS. It's a map that they started with that shows just the existing facilities on the I-15 corridor. And so when we're talking about how we integrate, some of the ways we can integrate active transportation into the environmental process, we first need to know what's out there. And so specifically on I-15, I'm going to talk about I-15 for the next few slides. The team went on this 16-mile corridor with 12 interchanges, I believe it is, and cataloged all of the crossings of I-15 and what the characteristics were there. You know, does it have a crosswalk? Is it near a school? You know, are there bike lanes or other pedestrian facilities there? And it was a lot of work, but it turned out to be very beneficial. And to the right, that is just an example of part of what that list looks like. You can imagine how long that list is, over 16 miles of freeway. And so then when you've got a list and you've done the surveys, you've met with community leaders, you've done some walk audits, you kind of get a sense of what those gaps are and how big the need is. And on a project like I-15, it was large, right? I mean, I-15 is a clear barrier between communities. Getting across I-15 is hard, regardless of who you are. And so it was an opportunity to elevate active transportation and connections to the communities. So we made active transportation a primary element of the purpose and need for I-15, which is something we've never done before, but it was very important for this project to get it right, because we're only going to touch this one more time, I like to think, at least maybe in my lifetime. And so it can be a primary or secondary need. If that doesn't mean anything to you, it doesn't really matter. Primary need is something that we have to, it's a must-have. Secondary needs are nice to have, is a way to think about it in the environmental process. And so that depends on the context and what the project is itself. But what we really don't want to do is create more barriers with our projects. And I have an example of that coming up. And so I included the purpose of the project here, the project being I-15, just to give an example of how we incorporated those elements into the purpose and need. And the reason for that is, and you can see it in improved safety, bikes and pedestrians are in there, better connected communities, planned front runner, double track, access to the front runner corridor and other regional transit and trails across I-15. And then it comes up again and improved mobility for all modes. So these are foundational criteria for the I-15 EIS.
And Brandon, just to re-emphasize how big of a deal it is and how much of a evolution it is for UDOT, honestly, for any DOT in the country to identify active transportation as part of the purpose and need for a major roadway project. It is a, I don't know, I feel like sometimes now, like I sound like the old guy, but like, you know, we've been at this for a while but we have. And this is a new and really significant development that UDOT is incorporating active transportation into the base of their environmental processes. So just again, wanted to highlight it's meaningful. So
Yeah.
Carry on.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is an approach that I think we might be taking more and more on our larger projects. I think a project like I-15 comes around once in a career, although this is twice if you count I-15 core in Utah County. Hopefully, maybe it'll be the last. I almost said hopefully, but I kind of like doing what I do. But incorporating AT into these projects provides a more holistic approach by providing mobility choices for all users. And the need for trails and pathways are considered with the same weight as roads. And it allows for different modes and circumstances to be addressed as one system. And it's probably hard to read, but even in the screening criteria, you'll see specific callouts to pedestrian and active transportation facilities, bicycle facilities. And what this does is this elevates active transportation to the same level of I-15 when it comes to evaluating alternatives, which is, as Andrew stated, is incredible. We've never done something like that before, and I think we haven't built it yet, but I think it's really going to pay off. So some of the benefits of using it as primary need is, again, it helps with all the screening criteria. Any alternative that does not provide or prevents those active transportation elements from being implemented and functional didn't make it to the alternatives table. So through the screening process, there was questions, does this question enhance or inhibit active transportation? If the answer is the latter, it got screened. And so this is just an example of what some of the impacts of the alternatives were looked at once they were furthered, and active transportation is in the impacts to the built environment. And so what came out of that, all of that work, you know, multiple workshops, years of analysis, was some great active transportation facilities, I think. So on the left in the lower is Parish Lane, and you can see there's 12-foot shared use paths on both sides. There's a new connection. That bottom is a new connection between the east side and the west side, connecting Legacy Parkway Trail to a community park on the other side of I-15, which is incredible to me because that's something that came up in the walk audits. It came up in the community workshops that we had. And so that idea kind of organically came to the table through just the observation of needs. Today, if you go on Parish Lane and you travel travel west, it comes to a T intersection at a drainage. And across that is Legacy Parkway and the Legacy Parkway Trail. And so there was clear connection there, a clear needed connection there, because you could see people were going under or over the barrier that's there, getting across that drainage and walking their bikes or themselves over to use the Legacy Trail. So a new connection for the community from a park that's conveniently named Community Park to the west, to the I-15 trail, the Legacy Trail. And then to the left on 600 North, working with the city and the community through there, you can see that we were able to provide protected bike lanes as well as a 12-foot shared use path. And one of my favorites is a new shared use path along Beck Street from Salt Lake City to North Salt Lake. That was for you, Ted.
I can't overstate how excited I am about that project. I'm just gonna say.
It's gonna be great.
Beck Street has could be argued as the most needed active transportation improvement in the region for bike commuting, because it's the only way you can get between two counties, and it's just north of downtown Salt Lake City. Not the only way. There's the Jordan River Trail.
Great, thank you. So that was I-15, just a highlight of how we did it and some of what came out of it. These are just a few examples. We could go through every interchange and I could tell you this, not maybe offhand, but we could show you the specifics of what's being done for active transportation. All those decisions were conscious, I like to think, and that what we were trying to do was consciously solve a problem, and also not introduce more barriers for the future. And so highly elevated on I-15, it was a big deal. But I wanted to also touch on the projects where it may not become part of the primary purpose and need, because we are still trying to work active transportation into everything we do. So this is just an example of a project near Ogden. This is 24th Street and I-15. The project is to upgrade the interchange there. And this graphic is just meant to show the no build condition. So this is showing everything but the project itself. And on this map, there's not a lot of AT components there if you look at it. And I'm sorry if AT is not the right term. I'm not a professional AT person. But the team working with the city and the community and doing some ground level research were able to come up with, and this is a picture of their preferred alternative that includes an active transportation connection that crosses I-15 and gets people over to the west side or east side, depending on where they start. So it's an example of, it wasn't that project's goal necessarily, it wasn't that project's intent, but we were there and there's definitely a need recognized and it could be accommodated with the project, and so why not? Another one the last one that I'll talk about, and I like this one a lot. This was an interchange project in St. George at milepost 11. So a new interchange at milepost 11 through through communities that have already been divided. There is 7th Avenue, I'm going to call it, because I can't remember if it's north or south right now. That does cross, but it doesn't have a connection to the interstate. So if the idea is to connect that to the interstate, and if we do that, it's going to make pedestrian crossing at that location pretty hard, be through a new interchange in the future. And the team recognized that there was a definite need for people to be able to move through that area, and I-15 was a definite barrier. And they recognized that there was 2 spots that it looked like a pedestrian crossing would be beneficial for, you know, Dixie, oh my gosh, what is Utah Technology? Man, Utah Tech, thank you. And the residential areas. So the team wasn't able to accommodate that within their budget and their scope, but they recognized it and they addressed it in the document that this is a need. And what they didn't do was prohibit it from being able to be done in the future. So they kept their elevation of the freeway higher for longer than it needed to be, so those underpasses could be constructed in the future somehow. And lo and behold, the grant writers and city and UDOT worked together to get a new grant for those 2 crossings at $87 million. And they will be built. Maybe they'll be incorporated with the construction of the interchange. I don't know. But I do think that the groundwork that the team did, working with the communities and the active transportation teams to elevate the issue, put it on people's radar screen, and get people talking about it, really had, I think, laid the groundwork for a successful grant. That's all I have in terms of prepared things. I appreciate everyone's time, and I'm happy to take anyone's questions.
Brandon, I'll just say what people are thinking, which is thank you, and it's exciting. And I don't know that anybody will be completely satisfied, right, ever as we move forward in this work. For those of us that are walking and biking a lot, I know there's so much room to improve, but this is a huge, huge step forward and really promising. And just look forward to the continued work and collaboration to tie all these project elements together, because as you stated, people need mobility choices, and this is, when we're doing projects, this is the way to go about it. So thank you for coming in and giving us an insight into how you go about this.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, once again, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate that. As the chair, I want to just go ahead and try to move the meeting along here, and due to the interest of time and knowing that typically we'd be ending by now. On item number 6, I'm going to make a quick adjustment here, and because all of us know we can contact Wasatch Regional Front Council for any technical assistance that we may need, let's just go ahead and jump over to Daniel Wayne and have him give us a quick update on some of the newly funded projects and maybe even a quick highlight on a completed one.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Dan Wayne, Community Planning Manager with MAG, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll try to be brief so we can keep the meeting moving along. But if you're not familiar with the TAG program, TAG is to MAG what the long-standing TLC program is for Wasatch Front Regional Council. The main objective being to facilitate the integration of transportation and land use planning in a meaningful way. These are only planning funds. They can't be used for capital projects, but we do encourage our applicants to keep in mind capital projects and use their TAG awards to help develop content that they need to compete for funds like Safe Streets for All or the UTN funding and other resources. Today, I just really wanted to talk about some examples of some successful projects that we funded through the program and encourage your participation in that program if you're in the MAG region. So TAGs in its second cycle, we received 13 applications. We're able to fund 7 this cycle. To date, we've been able to award about a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning that you do have to come to us with a solid project. But if you do need funds and you're able to articulate your project well, that there's a very good chance that you'll be able to get resources through the TAG program. Our focus is and desire is to fund projects that are most beneficial to the community and not necessarily the projects that have the best application. We're always encouraging that, but we're really focused on what projects are the best for the community and the region and have the most benefit. Let me just skip to some examples of some specific projects that I wanted to highlight. These are projects that are either in progress or they've just been awarded, so there's no deliverables per se to present to you on these projects. But the first one is in Alpine City, and I'm glad to see Mayor Merrill here and encourage her to correct anything that if I misspeak at all. But this project's exciting. In my words, it's a pocket city, kind of tucked into the corner of the mountains there, meaning there's not a lot of through traffic going through that community. It's largely built out compared to other communities. There's no streetlights in the community. So in summary, it's a very active transportation friendly community. There's a desire by the community to increase access and the vibrancy of their main street downtown, but to do so in a way that doesn't distract from the sense of community and that active transportation friendliness that it already has. And so we worked with the city to define a project and award this project that focuses on what really are the only 3 corridors in and out of the community. These are the community's 3 gateways. And it's the opportunity presents itself to be able to focus limited resources on just 3 corridors to maximize the benefit and the transformational change that we're able to have on just these 3 gateways into the community. So we're working with them to ensure that we plan high quality, complete streets that serve the needs of all users and that prevent Alpine and the Main Street area from being overly congested as well, and to keep that sense of community.
Mayor Merrill, do you want to add anything to that?
No, but did you mention that it was funded? Because I didn't realize, I thought we just had the active transportation.
Yes, congratulations. Yes.
No, that's why I'm like.
Yes, it was selected for funding. Yeah, so we're working through that right now, and you'll be receiving some documentation of that shortly.
That's good news. Thank you.
Very welcome. Another project is called the Vineyard Southeastern Corridor Master Plan and the Active Transportation Wayfinding Project. As you all know, Vineyard's an emerging city center built around the historic Geneva Steel site. And the challenge here is to build in active transportation and connectivity from the initial development and not have to reverse engineer those facilities into the communities like we're so often forced to do. The project or the scope of this project is twofold. It's to plan for an initial loop is the plan for an initial loop in the southeastern quadrant of that downtown area. This will serve as kind of a high bar of high quality active transportation facilities on key facilities that lead into the city center and the front runner station. This is just a conceptual, not final rendering of what some of those plans are for the city center. But I just wanted to show it to show you how the facilities that we're talking about on the lower side there are designed to feed into this. Can we hit play on that? I'm not going to play this whole video. I just wanted to play just a few seconds of it just to kind of give you an idea of bigger picture. This initial shot is just showing from the lake moving into downtown, some of the visions that the city has for having a continuous park-like gateway into the city center. This project that we're working on with them would help connect into this corridor using established corridors. And then the third one I just wanted to highlight really quick is in Payson. So we have an issue in Payson there. There's a lot of investment going on. There's the redevelopment or the reorientation of the Main Street interchange there. There's a UVU campus. There's a new front runner station that eventually will be built there. Problem is I-15 divides these facilities, the education and the front runner station from the existing community. So they requested funds and we funded a project to help find ways to make that corridor more permeable for active transportation users. And it also looks at Main Street, which serves double duty as a state route and a connection between old or current Payson and the new development that's happening in and around the interchange. And so it'll continue to be a challenge because that corridor is going to need to serve the needs of all users, including vehicles and trucks and active transportation users. So there's where we're not able to accomplish that on Main Street, they're envisioning also some parallel routes to that can be more like bicycle boulevards there to help meet those objectives. But just at a high level, these are 3 examples of specific projects that we've been working on and that have an active transportation connection. We're eager to begin additional discussions with our other cities within our communities to help them access these funds and to maximize the benefits of the program to their community. Each year we do have a concept applications that are due in September with final applications that are due in December. And we encourage you to contact us if you're within the MAG region to discuss how the program might work within your community. We really don't consider it less of a competitive grant program where you have a grant application and it either sinks or swims. It's more of an introduction. Your project concept is an introduction to us where we can begin to have a conversation of what your needs are and how can we help you. And it's an ongoing discussion even after the application is submitted to make sure that we're providing the best for you and meeting the needs of your community. And that's all I have, and happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay, is there any questions at all today? Daniel, I just want to say thank you. That was good information, and certainly it helps everyone understand the process and the fact that, you know, it's an ongoing process as well. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
And I will say, you know, Vineyards, you know, some of us can be jealous of Vineyard because they get to Greenfield, they get to plan out. That was a great little video of how they can plan a community from scratch. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move the meeting along then. We are down to item number 7, which is our other business. And what I want to do is just go ahead and turn the time over to Hugh so he can talk about our Beehive bikeways and update on the Golden Spoke. And Hugh, I'll just let you just kind of wrap the meeting up if you don't mind. And we'll also, if you could, mention the next meeting, and then that way we can get everybody back to their daily functions. So
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just be really quick here. BI Bikeways, we're reaching out. Again, this is an effort to connect the Wasatch Choice Centers in collaboration with you. If you haven't heard from us, you will shortly. We mentioned the Golden Spoke Ride already. There's a couple of federal grant opportunities where the deadlines are coming up. If you have interest in any of those as a community, get in touch with us. Or if you think you're going to apply, please get in touch with us just to coordinate and so we know what you're up to and see how we can help in any way. And then I will say, didn't get to the transportation land use connection funding projects today, but there's plenty of information on our website, and we will get to that at our next meeting in a little bit more detail. Sorry about that, Byron. I will save you for June. And then next meeting is in June. As was mentioned, June 11th at 9:15 a.m. Reach out with anything at any time to anybody regarding anything active transportation or anything otherwise transportation and land use related. We're always here to help. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you attending today's meeting. And like always, you know, these guys are just a phone call away for help. So I appreciate what all you do for all of us in this, throughout the state. So thank you. Okay, this meeting's adjourned.
Just gotta grab a quick
Thanks,
motion.
everybody.
Anybody want to make the motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor
Okay.
Merrill.
All right. Thank you. I
Now we're
should've-
good. All right. Thanks, Mayor
Okay,
Petro.
thanks, you guys.
Yeah, right. That's amazing. Yeah, so nice to see you. Thanks for coming.